Oh, it's being live stream. Kalau ya, right. Like, I guess you can start now. Yeah. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum and good morning. Thank you for joining us for APM Guest Lecture Series organized by Academy Professor Malaysia. I am Zaharun, lecturer at University Malaysia Terengganu, your MC for this morning. Before we begin, please allow me to draw attention to a few housekeeping matters. Please make sure that you are in silent or muted mode. And to ask questions to the speakers, please use the chat box stating your affiliation together with your questions. And for those who are interested to get an e-certificate, please fill in the Google form that will be shared in the chat box. And thank you for your cooperation. Now, I would like to invite Professor Dato Engineer Dr. Muhammad Saleh Jaafar, President of Academy Professor Malaysia, to deliver his opening remarks. Persilakan, Dato.
Terima kasih Dr. Zaharul. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berbahagia Profesor Tan Sri Datuk Seri Dr. Nur Azlan Ghazali, currently a Fulbright visiting scholars at the Center for International Development, Harvard Kennedy School, our honorable speaker for today, our guest speaker for today. Yang berbahagia Emeritus Professor Dr. Abdul Rahman Embong, a fellow Academy Professor Malaysia, our discussion this morning. Yang berbahagia Emeritus Professor Dr. Jomo Kwame Sundram, Honorary Fellow of Academy Professor Malaysia, our discussion also this morning. Yang dihormati Associate Professor Dr. Shazida Jan Muhammad Khan, Associate Member of Academy Professor Malaysia, our moderator this morning. Academy Professor Malaysia Council Member and Academy Professor Malaysia members, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to all. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for attending our APM Guest Lecture Series. APM Guest Lecture Series is one of the flagship programs organized by Academy Professor Malaysia, APM. There are other flagship programs including APM Fellow Lecture Series, APM Roundtable Discussion, APM Conference, and APM Webinar or Forum called Wacana Academy Professor. This guest lecture series is organized as a sign of respect and to honor our distinguished scholars and distinguished personalities in Malaysia who have excelled in their chosen fields of expertise. They have given impact through their substantial contributions in their respective fields of knowledge and contributions to the society throughout their career. The forum, the series also serves as a platform for scholars to discuss strategic issues that will not only benefit policymakers, but also the community as a whole. And today we are very fortunate to have Tan Sri Nur Azlan to speak about economic recovery, post-COVID economy beyond recovery. So for information, Academy Professor has so far organized 8 lecture series delivered by Professor Dr. Asma Ismail, who is President for Academy Professor Malaysia, and now she is the advisor for the National Science Advisor, and Professor Dr. John Esposito, Distinguished Professor Dr. Raja Rasia, Distinguished Professor Dr. Shamsul Amri, and Professor Dr. Wang Gungwu, and Professor Dr. James Ching, and the last one was Dr. Chandra Muzaffar. So as you can see that we have had a series of supremely distinguished speakers in our series. And today we are extremely honored and privileged. The lecture series will be delivered by none other than Professor Tan Sri Dr. Nur Azlan Ghazali on a very important topic that is about advancing the nation post-COVID-19 beyond recovery. And I understand Tan Sri Azlan will be speaking more about transformation rather than small recovery exercise that we are going to hear, inshallah, this morning. He is a renowned economist. Professor Azlan is highly qualified to speak on this topic. And allow me to read a very brief biodata. I'm sure everyone in Malaysia knows him, otherwise they are not Malaysian, I suppose. But I think just for formality purposes, it's good to recognize that Tan Sri Azlan was a Vice Chancellor for UKM 2014 to 2018, and he's a Professor of Economics in UKM Graduate School of Business, and also now Director for Malaysian Inclusive Development and Advancement Institute, MINDA UKM. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, he is currently a Fulbright Scholar, visiting scholar at the Center for International Development, Harvard Kennedy School. He's a member of Economic Action Council and was Executive Director for EAC from 2020 to 2022. He's also a Mason Fellow at Harvard Kennedy School and also Commonwealth Fellow of Financial Economics and Banking of the Association of Commonwealth Universities. He was conferred with honorary professors of economics by University of Cyberjaya, Malaysia, for his contribution to Malaysia's economic development. He also received a Distinguished Civilian Service Award for 2020. His expertise is widely recognized, being a member of the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank Malaysia 2015-2019 and the National Development Planning Council 2014 to the current date. And of course, he has so many other responsibilities that we cannot spend time reading all his contribution to the country. I'm sure we will benefit from Tan Sri's lectures today, and also with the discussions from Professor Emeritus Jomo and Professor Dato' Dr. Abdul Rahman Embong. So let's hope that we all benefit from today's session. And thank you again for participating in our lecture series. Zahrul, back to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Saleh. Now I would like to invite Associate Professor Dr. Shazida Jan Muhammad Khan, lecturer at UUM College of Business, and also an associate member of APM to moderate the session. Persilakan Dr. Shazida.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zahrul. Yang berbahagia Profesor Tan Sri Datuk Sri Dr. Nur Azlan Ghazali, our honorable keynote speaker for today's session. Yang berbahagia Profesor Datuk Insinyur Dr. Saleh Jaafar, President of Academy Professor Malaysia, our distinguished discussant and fellows of APM for today's lecture series. Of course, we all know Emeritus Professor Dr. Jomo Kwame Sundaram, and also yang berbahagia Emeritus Professor Datuk Dr. Abdul Rahman Embong. And to all distinguished guests, fellow professors, academics, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. Welcome to APM Guest Lecture Series. My name is Shazida, and it's indeed an honor to be the moderator for this session in the presence of distinguished guests, renowned scholars, fellow professors, of course, our friends, academics, students, and everyone that here today for the APM Guest Lecture Series. Before I start, let me just share the format for today's event, which comprise of basically three subsessions. We will start with the key note by Yang Berbahagia Tan Sri, and then we followed by the discussant, two of our distinguished discussant. Then we will open for Q&A towards the end of our lecture series. So everyone can just throw the questions in the chat box, or perhaps also Dr. Zahrul will also take up some that will be written in the WhatsApp. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, we know for the past 2 years we've been struggling with COVID-19. I think there have been a lot of discussions on what has been in the economy, how the COVID-19 have spread the issues of healthcare system, the social, the community framework, and of course the economy. And what we're doing now, we try to regain the societal confidence. We try to address the gaps in the digital economy and try to leverage the green opportunities, which is we're thinking this is a very imperative transformation that we need to do in the coming years. So we're also looking into the regional and global collaboration for the government, because this is a very crucial to long-term economic and also societal, plus the environmental resilience. Because now we are not only looking about the issue of economy, we are also facing other global issues in terms of climate and also the rest of other contraction in the economy. So today, the recovery in the 2021 has been followed by increasingly gloomy development in 2022. As a risk, we can see that it began to materialize. So global output, we can see how it contracted, and then we also see how this world economy is starting to weaken due to the pandemic, plus what is happening now, worsen with the situation of what has been looking into the slowdown in other countries, China, for example, and then the US decisions. So these have all make the situation become very vulnerable, okay, very volatile, a lot of uncertainties in the economy. People are worried about what is going on in the coming futures of years. So these complex issues of the economy, the health, the climate change, which cause a lot of ambiguity, okay? So now moving forward, for the title of today's lecture series, Advancing the Nation, may facing more than just obstacle created by the COVID-19. So what we need to be done and how to react towards the situation, perhaps this we will listen more by our distinguished guest as speaker. Okay, in other words, COVID-19 crisis response must be designed to help decision maker to look beyond the recovery. So we need to get better insight on how to realize the nation's recovery and hope that we're really in the right track. So this indeed will be highlighted by our honorable speaker. Of course, for today, yang berbahagia Professor Tan Sri Datuk Dr. Sri Nur Azan Ghazali. So with the title of speech, Advancing the Nation Post-COVID Beyond Recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, let me invite Tan Sri Datuk to deliver his speech. Tan Sri, the screen is all yours.
Okay. Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thanks, Prof. Shazida, Prof. Datuk Muhammad Saleh, the President of APM. Thank you for inviting me and also giving me a chance to share this morning. And respected panels, Emeritus, Prof. Jomo, and also Prof. Datuk Rahman, and everyone there. So I am 12 hours behind all of you, but it's nice, 9 o'clock just sharp. I mean, we are 9 p.m. here, you are 9 a.m. in the morning. Okay, I have my slides. I mean, let me try to run through my sharing through the slides. My intent is not so much to go into the factual detail, but I would like to give some kind of a perspective that probably my concern is that some perspective are missing from the discussion in Malaysia today. So let's move on. Naima, yang control slide. Let me just quickly introduce Minda UKM, a new institute. Actually was mooted a long time back, since I mean, I would say 2015. But hold on. Let me go back very quickly. 2015, but now it's materialized. So this is a pure public policy institute intended to support the nation to be more playing the advocacy role, as well as pushing for some agenda of change that are inclusive with respect to development and advancement of Malaysia. Very small, very new, nothing much. There's no website whatsoever yet, but something that we are working hard now. I look forward for everyone also to be involved with Minda later on as we are progressing. Okay, I have three parts basically. One is just to give a quick overview of Malaysia. This is, I think, for many, I mean, economists, we are very familiar with this. There are a couple of deep in Malaysian economy. I'm looking at the Vision 2020 era from 1990 all the way. You know, we have the latest one was COVID-19. Basically, in 2020, the economy contracted. We always, whenever in Malaysia, whenever there are recoveries, when people look at these charts, they always say that we are having a V-shaped recovery. But I would like to caution everyone that we should not be rushing by saying that things are getting better and so on. But the challenge remains. I mean, if you look at the momentum of growth by decades, basically the momentum of growth has been declining. And for 12 Malaysia Plan, the targeted growth is 4.5 to 5.5. And if you look at the last two blue dots, you know, then we see that whether can we be in that band or not, taking another 3 years to go, right? But again, I'm not proposing for Malaysia to grow too fast, but we need to grow rightly at a very sustainable pace. Next, again, for the last 30 years in Malaysia, basically our concern is very much about you know, getting the so-called income target. I think probably this is one thing that probably we need to relook at, whether it's really chasing for the income level of a high income economy is supreme, is something that really will make us happy, something that will make us feel the well-being is better or not. But if you look at the charts, basically we are short by about 17%, if I'm not mistaken, around that. But the challenge now is that, I mean, if we look at the pattern of the blue lines, I'm not worried that I'm quite sure that in the next 4 or 5 years, if we have the right momentum, no shocks, I mean, the blue line will cross the red line. But the challenge is that the day that we should be clapping our hand? Is that the day where life is better? We have a quality living? Is that the day that we should basically say that, hey, we achieve our target? I strongly believe that there should be more other parameters that we need to look at, and to make sure that the whole nation understand what we are going forward in the future. Next. Again, throughout the period, if you focus at the black line and the dotted dash line, we can see that by 2000, around 2003 or 4, the black line, which is Malaysia, now moving below the average peer line. I mean, I define peer very loosely here, looking at pure income level, looking at those who are somewhere near to us. And what we see is that as we move forward, the gap between our performance income-wise compared to the peer nation, which is in the same class of us back in the 90s, we are deviating further down. So this is, again, the challenge of momentum, the challenge of assuring that we are keeping pace with the rest. Next. Now, I'm trying to zoom in a bit more. I mean, sorry to be a little technical here, but this is something related to what I mentioned about, do not over celebrate of the V-shaped curve. The V-shape looks nice, but actually, if we look at it very carefully, I mean, all the blue lines, basically something of the past. I'm using the midpoint, 5.3 to 6.3 for 2022, 5.8%. If we look at that, we can see that actually the average growth, I mean, since 2020 onward, we are actually moving at 1% annually, and the challenge now is that to do the catch up, we need to speed up the growth and so on. And okay, I want to pause here a bit. That I think last 2 days, I think the World Bank, the East Asia and the Pacific announced that Malaysia's growth for 2022 is now being revised upward to 6.4%, but next year will be 4.2%. But the challenge now is that on the other side of the economy, people are looking at the exchange rate, which is also historic now, breaking the records of reaching to, latest I heard about 4.6 or something like that. Our Minister of Finance come up with a TikTok videos, if I'm not mistaken, explain clearly that Malaysia is now, first of all, not in the stage of crisis, and we are recovering quite very well. And he mentioned these are the 7 items that he mentioned very specifically to counter the argument that we are in the crisis. Broadly, I will agree with the Minister of Finance, Tengku Zafrul, that we are not in crisis per se, as people define. But the challenge now is that whether are these signs of recovery, which is sustainable, or is it really policy driven? Is it something have changed in the country? Or is it merely that we are joining the wagon, or basically the rising tide of the global economy? So I would like to get all of you to go through one by one, because this is what was announced up to second quarter, and I like to make some comparison with some of the more latest information that are now are pouring in the discussion everywhere in terms of the global economy. So let's try to look into one by one of these 7 indicators mentioned specifically by our Minister of Finance. Okay, let's move next. Now, growth. Very clearly on the left, this is what Malaysia has up to second quarter 2022. You see that the upward trend, the 3 consecutive quarters in fourth quarter 2021, first quarter and the second quarter 8.9. And of course, probably this year we're going to record quite a good growth, but the challenge again is the next year. The discussion here today, everywhere, I believe everywhere, people are looking about what will be happening in 2023. And obviously, the latest that I saw is on the 15th of September, World Bank came out with a new report, really looking again at the fact that 2023 recessions or slowing down of economic activity will be quite, something imminent, something that you cannot avoid. Almost all regions in the world at the different class of economic stage development will experience this slowdown. And if you look at the US, for example, next year is projected to be only about 1%, and in the Europe area, 1.2%, and so on and so on. So again, the idea is that the growth that we are seeing in Malaysia is a result of the past. So soon, I think in about 9 days, we will have a budget 2023. Hopefully, I'm surely believe that all these numbers will be factored in, and that will challenge the recovery that we are having now. Next, we look at one by one. I just want to go very quickly about one item, each one of them. Minister of Finance, YB Minister Tengku Zafrul also highlighted the Industrial Production Index. Yes, the index, if you look at the blue line, at the black dark line on the left, is going up. But again, we look at the global manufacturing. The PMI now is obviously hitting downward, crossing the 50 level. That shows that something. That there will be slowing down in terms of the in terms of production, in terms of recent orders and so on. And this is true almost everywhere again, right? So industrial activities also, we will be subjecting to that. Next. We can do this quite quick. The other one is about exports. I'm a little bit not that comfortable when Minister of Finance mentioned that the gain from exchange rate depreciation is exports. I think that should not be the interpretation that it is something that we seems to be happy with it. By being able to sell more, but because it is cheap, to me, it's not a progress. We need to look into a more quality dimensions, competitiveness that assure that our products and the quality of our products are actually what is demanded. But nevertheless, yes, we do enjoy. Exporters enjoy that. But as Minister of Finance mentioned that, we need to look comprehensively. We only look at export, but we have yet to look into the imports. If you ask the imports, the importers, probably they are the ones who are suffering now. And this is very recent. I think it just came out about a day, 2 days ago. The head of the DG of the WTO was mentioning about the revision in the trade growth for next year. And as you see on the right, is further down and down. Again, to what extent that global economy will help us in recovering, that become a very challenging question now. Let's move next. And the other two about retail, YB Minister of Finance mentioned about wholesale and retail. Again, in the same notes, this is very domestic in nature. I believe that the moment we ended our PKP, the mobility, we opened up our borders, we allow people to move as usual. Definitely, the spending, the retail, and also the wholesale will go up. But again, MIR recently, in early August, showing that now we start seeing that the sentiments of the consumers are also going down. So again, we have a challenge here in terms of the recovery that we are enjoying for the last few quarters. Next, wholesale, similar sama juga. Basically, FMM. Recently, I joined a discussion organized by Babi Datuk Pa. There are quite a number of economists and members from the industries. Many are sharing. Some of the, our exporters association are reporting that orders are going down and the productions are going down. In addition to the challenge that they are facing with respect to the, the increased raw materials price, in terms of shortage of labor, supply chain, and so on. But again, broadly, we are seeing things down. Okay, the other three items, I will go very quickly. Now, if we look at the number of unemployment, yes, it's faded down 3.7%, which is quite a good, remarkable achievement coming from the height of earlier about 8%. But if you deep inside the labor market, we have a serious structural issues there. You know, if we look at, for example, if you look on the blue call out on the left, I want you to focus is in terms of the underemployment with respect to skill. These numbers has been increasing over the years. I mean, this is broadly, it reflects that Malaysia are not able to produce, to generate enough, jobs that demand the right qualities of talents. I think our colleagues at Kementerian Pengajian Tinggi, Datuk Saleh also used to be there. The issue of underemployment of our undergrads, diploma holders and above is getting worse and worse. And while the rest of the numbers has improved, but if you look at the underemployment by skill, then you start to see that that is actually moving the other directions. On the right, inflation. I mean, again, inflation is very tricky in Malaysia. I mean, if we look at the official number, it is about 4.4%. But we all know that, the ministers, both Minister of Economics and Minister of Finance, both mentioned officially that if we proceed without subsidies, the inflation is about around 11.4%. So we are hiding behind this. But the issue is the cost that we have to incur. Remember that 80 billion is something belanja hangus lah. Basically, 80 billion is something that we have to spend 2022. The challenge now will be able to spend again next year of the equal amount. Later on, I'll share with you this 80 billion ringgit of subsidy is huge and should be something very alarming to many of us. And again, with respect to the lower income group, food inflation is something that become a challenge for them. It nearly to about 7%, and only about 81% of the 552 items monitored by DOSM actually are recording higher increase in prices. So food security, supply chain again, competition, productivity of food and produce remains a challenge for Malaysia. With respect to the Bursa, I think I don't have to make much comments there. Yes, MK might be saying that there's more participations, more foreign investors coming, more retail investors. But again, if you look at the trend, is obviously this is not only Malaysia, but the rest of the world also are facing this situation, especially when US pushing up their interest rate and so on. Now, this is the case of what I call the rising tide effect. I mean, it's not my term. Back in the 60s, John F. Kennedy used this term. I mean, if you look, go further inside, someone said that one of his writers actually used the term, the rising tide effect. What we are observing for the last 1.5 years is basically the fact that there is a huge growth momentum in the advanced nation. The global economy is around nearly to 6% and so on. Everybody is lifted up. Now, the challenge about the rising tide effect is that how long will this growth, as I have shown earlier, growth next year probably will be reversed in terms of patterns. And is it truly that whenever you see the rising tide effect that everybody is lifted up? Are we really curing all the injuries of the crisis? So we need a bit more micro data to really show that everyone is benefiting from the rising tide. I think this is, I don't have the data for that, but I believe that if we go a bit more micro, more localized, more sectoral, probably we will be seeing some, groups of economic sectors are still striving to stand up again after being hit by the crisis and also all other problems, climate change, banjir dan sebagainya. Now, this is recovery. Yes, there's a recovery, but the recovery is very much due to the rising tide effect, and there are challenges behind this. What I would like to take you after this is basically to look into a more serious issue. I believe that the reason I chose this topic is beyond recovery. I was there in the crisis from day one. In a way, I was seconded to Economic Action Council Secretariat to head the Secretariat from day one. I moved there exactly when when COVID started. I was there for about 2 years and 2.5 years until today I'm involved, but though I'm not maintaining the office. But I want to share here, I am seeing something else. And that something else is what I would like to share with all of you. Now, let's look into Malaysian economy in a more, a little bit different dimension. Instead of looking at all these indicators, let's look at the structure of our economy. Now, there are several parameters, discussion that I would like to highlight about our country. No doubt that we have recorded, on average, a good growth throughout the 30-year period, but we ended Vision 2020 with a couple of major, I would say it's a major, structural impediments in front of us. And I call this as a vulnerable nation. If we look one, and I think everyone already familiar with this, the issue of how many people, what are the portion of the people are benefiting from growth. The idea of having these segmentations of B40, M40, T20. If you look on the left, you can see the pattern of growth are very different for different income class. So we need to be a bit more micro in terms of concluding that the country is benefiting. My fear, if truly 2025, our income, national income level cross the high income level, my worry is that there will be huge segment of the society says that is the country who are richer, but not me. On the right side, what you are seeing is that basically the impact of the crisis, probably the measure slightly different now, but this is right in the middle of the crisis when there's some estimates come out about half of the society are experiencing decline in income. And definitely the low income group, are more affected by this. About 3.1 million households are experiencing decline in income. Okay, so that's number one, the so-called vulnerable nation, number one. Still number one, I just want to give a bit more highlight. The data is a bit behind. 2019 household income survey, focus on the right side after the green bar chart, which is Malaysia. What you see there, the triangles are the level of vulnerable, basically the level of income that shows all the bar charts are below. They are, the midpoint, basically 50% of the household are having income which is lower than the vulnerable income level, which is 2.5 of the poverty rate in that particular state. So you can imagine that you might be at right above. If you take the end Kelantan, if you earn, let's say 3,700, you will classify yourself. We will classify you as above the mid-income level, the median. But actually you are still below the vulnerable. You are still in the category of a vulnerable group. So these numbers are very alarming to me. But we need to really address this. That yes, for a nation, we seems to be having improving, but there are a bunch of the states are experiencing slightly different situation. On the right side, recovery, again, 8 states are having the impact on the income is a lot more than the national average. If you look from the top, Sarawak is minus 15.7, all the way to Kedah 11.5. Though some of the states are not as bad as are better than the national average. So vulnerable nation 2. Let's go next. If we look in terms of the regions, again, this is not new. I think Prof. Jomo always talk about, I remember when you discussed about the ECRL last time, you were talking about how the East Coast are deprived in terms of growth. If you look at this, Malaysia actually only have 4 states that I will consider as a locomotive states, which is Selangor, Penang, Johor, and Malacca. Of course, this line was taken into account 2020, so it's a bit lower, but the 4 states are the one that drive the economy. My worry is that all the states, there are about 9 states that have about 54% of Malaysian population, they are on the left side. And more so, the worst is the lower end quadrant. These are slow growth and low income. And if you look on the right side, even the improvement again, for Malaysia, the improvement for 2016 to 19 is about 645. But if you go further down, in terms of growth, there are all the reds are basically recorded lower than national growth of 12.3%. So we have pocketed we have a challenge. That's why I'm urging for the nation to really pay attention to these sub-regional variations. We can no longer just simply quote national data, but we need to have a more focused. Probably we need to have an kind of maybe even the 12 Malaysia plan should really I know they mentioned about all these regional gap, but we need to be more serious about looking into the regions that are considered as a laggard regions. These are going to be very serious for Malaysia. So vulnerabilization 3, let's go 3. What produces our economy? You know, all the products and services that we are seeing, basically a result of an output coming from a very vulnerable enterprises. You know, in Malaysia, when we always talk about FDI, large MNCs coming to Malaysia, big companies and so on. But if you count by the number of enterprise, about 97% of our enterprise, these are the ones registered, not including the informal is even worse. You know, the informal sector, the registered are basically small and medium enterprise, and 70% are micros. This is what we are seeing during the crisis. The group in small and micros are affected. They run the businesses in the very traditional manners, not adopting technology, no proper accounting, no proper registration, some of them. There's no social security. Some of them are not, benefiting from the Pekesos, SOCSOS security program and so on. And in Malaysia, about 66%, near to 70% of Malaysians are working in this kind of category. So this is to me, I mean, it's a very serious structural issue. How do we lift up these companies? Not just by size, but in terms of what is inside that. I think probably many of you have not, I mean, the report is not out yet, but I've listened to some preliminary report of the so-called industry forward to make assessment on the readiness of our SMEs. I must say that I'm very concerned about the readiness of Malaysian companies, to adopt all this technology. So yes, we mentioned about it, but it is not happening on the ground. On the right side, in terms of exports, look at how concentrated we are. Top 5 consume about 52% of our exports. This relates to the earlier charts on recovery when all these countries, basically Singapore, China, USA, EU, when they are slowing down, it will definitely hurt us. So these are the kind of economic activities that are the fundamentals of our economy that are things that need to be attended. Let's move on. Just a couple more, then we will have. Now, vulnerable nation number 4 in terms of fiscal strain. If you look at the charts on the left, this is the blue line is basically the revenue of the government, the fiscal, and the red line is the operating expenditure. The gap is almost near to 0. This is a very serious thing to me, that if our operating expenditure is more than the income, it means that we have to borrow even to live on the daily basis. That's what it means. Definitely we have been borrowing for our DE, the development expenditure. We have less money to put for longer term investment, but even to survive on the operational sides, we are having problems. So I look forward for 2023 budget, how they want to basically improve on this. This problem is not new. I was in M10 way back in the 2006, 2009. We have alerted of this long before, but until today, we are not able to correct that. And again, I would like to reiterate, to get everyone's attention that 80 billion of subsidy just doesn't make sense to me. This is almost equal to the total emoluments that we pay for the entire civil service. And remember that this is orang kata apa, belanja hangus lah. Next year, are we going to spend another 80 billion? How much more? I mean, we have to find a different ways of dealing with increasing prices. Price control per se, trying to make it artificially cheap, it is no longer right. It's wrong. In fact, the more we delay, the more difficult we want if we want to change later. I mean, I'm here very new in the US. The price of petrol basically, is about $4 for around $4 ringgit per liter, if I convert that to the liter, and of course, I mean, I was here back in the 80s. In the 80s, as a student, cheap student, then we pump in $1 is enough. But now hardly you can get even a gallon of it, and a gallon is nearly about $4 now. So again, we must be very brave. We have been talking about targeted subsidy for very long, but I can sense signals seem to be delay again. I mean, things like that. I know there are some political dimensions that need to be considered, but I still want to stress that we cannot prolong this kind of economy. Vulnerable Nation 5, I think there's another one. Again, I mentioned this already. I will not go too detailed, but you go further down, you can see 1.36 millions of our workers. They are working. So don't get too comfortable with the idea of employment rate. Unemployment goes down to 3.7%. We even need to look into those who are working. How much do they earn? Here we are showing this is the population that have a population that have a tertiary qualification, and about 4.6 are in the labor force, and about 4.3 are employed. And you can see 1.36%, about 31.2% are underemployed. These signals are very serious structural issues on both sides, the supply side as well as the demand side. If you look at in 2019 or something, the numbers are only showing that we are only able to produce about 25,000 jobs that requires tertiary qualification. Now, broadly, this is what I collected during the crisis. All this become a news every alternate day. Of course, people are looking at the health side in terms of COVID. But as an economist, to me, the COVID crisis basically unmasked our structural problems. These problems, these structural issues are not new. Some of them has been there for more than 10 years. And we are yet able to address these challenges. So beyond recovery, I think is very important. We must continue the agenda of reforms. I mean, people should not be frightened by saying that reform means life is going to be bad. People should not be saying that we recover first, then we reform. I think until and unless we reform, only then we can strengthen the competitiveness, the resilience of our economy. And so I've been make this call a lot. I mean, when I was in EAC, you move to the next page. Basically, to make a call that a recovery without reform is a waste. So early on, the rising tide effect is my concern or my throw with respect to the recovery. But for the structural, the ostrich effect. Can you move next? This is something young. I'm very worried. The ostrich effect, I mean, this is a metaphor. Ostrich tend to put their head down in the sand. But actually, the true story is that they are attending their eggs. But it being used by economists to show that, as though as the habit of trying to not to see the problems that is in front of you. And that makes you feel like, oh, there is no problem. So I hope that Malaysia will not be caught by this ostrich effect. Are we? For the last 10 years, for the last 15 years, are we really attending our problem and structural issues? Talk about labor force, talk about digitization, talk about automation, talk about education, talk about poverty, climate, even worse, talk about regional gaps. All this problem has been there. And I hope we will not be caught by this ostrich effect by putting our head in the sand and ignore all these changes. So thank you very much for giving me the time to share. And I think let me end there. And all these materials that I raised is purely on my own, my views, my love for the nation. And I would seriously call for the nation to pay attention beyond recovery. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Prof. I think it's a very good sharing. Okay, we can see that some of the things that Prof has mentioned is already there in the economy for the past years. It is the matter of how we treat and also strategize in terms of the policies and everything. So I think among the things that Prof indicate is about the household, their survivability and sustainability in the coming years. The regional, I agree about the sub-regional variables because every state is different, you know, different needs, different environment, different people. We need to cater that. And then in terms of firms and economy, this is also another issue about how more than 70%, as Prof mentioned just now, is among those micro, and these from 70%, I think more than half is informal, which is need to be looked into very deeply. They are way lagging in terms of readiness, in terms of technology, infrastructure, and also their survivability in the coming years, in terms of fiscal strain, where we need to find or to strategize a better way on how to find a new number. I think we're going to see a new number, Prof, in the coming budget in the few days' time, might be bigger than what we expected, or we'll see how was it. And then the quality workforce and quality, I think this is also not a new issue about underemployment. This has also been there for the past years. So I agree again that C19 or COVID-19 is like opening a Pandora box, you know, for everyone. It's unmasked a very long known challenges. And then this is how we need to, I agree again on how to reform, but then we need to find a strategy on how to make sure that people understand why we need to do that particular changes and why this involvement everybody, not only the policymaker. So now everybody, I think everyone is now looking forward to see our discussion. So I like to go into the next agenda where we're going to listen to our distinguished discussion. Let me begin by introduce to you our first discussion, our Professor Dr. Jomo Kwame Sundaram. Okay, so Professor Jomo is Emeritus Professor from University of Malaya. He was Assistant Director General and Coordinator for Economic and Social Development, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations from August 2012 until December 2015. He was Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development in the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs from January 2005 until June 2012, and also Ordinary Research Coordinator for the G24 Intergovernmental Group on International Monetary Affairs and Development from December 2006 until 2012. He is also our Honorary Fellow for Academy Professor Malaysia. So Prof, I think everybody are waiting for your discussion. So I pass to you, Prof. Jomo.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shazida, and Assalamu alaikum to all, and in different time zones. Thank you very much, Tan Sri Noazlan, for excellent review of a number of issues. In fact, I would strongly recommend that others who are on this call consider using this as a way of reviewing a number of issues for students especially. This, I think, is useful, and hopefully be used even beyond the universities, particularly to get people to think about many of these issues. Allow me to make 5 quick remarks. Tan Sri concludes with the statement, the crisis has unmasked long-known challenges. And I think there are two things which need to be said about this statement. It's a very good statement, but I would raise 2 questions. If they are long known, then why do they need to be unmasked? Okay, I think there is a bit of a contradiction here, and I'm afraid that the crisis has not unmasked many challenges which the country faces. And this is hinted at in the presentation itself, which leads me then to raise a number of other issues. Firstly, I think he correctly points out that the high-income nation status or high-income country status is unlikely to be achieved in 2025 as well. It was, as everybody knows, the intention of the people who are drafting Wawasan 2020, and many of our older colleagues will remember that at least 2 of the people who are drafting Wawasan 2020 were based at UKM in the heady years of the 1970s and 1980s. Now, the important point I would like to make here is that the original argument which Tun Mahathir made was not for a high-income country status, but rather to have a Malaysian nation. And the achievement of developed country status, which is more than just being a high-income country, remains a challenge for us today. I was very disappointed, to be honest, that during the period of when Tun Mahathir was Prime Minister the second time, the whole question of Wawasan 2020 did not re-enter the national discourse. This was very disappointing because in many ways, it was a very fitting vision of what the country should be. It reinforced what issues needed to be reinforced in the original Rukun Negara and Dasar Ekonomi Baru, but it also went beyond them because there were many gaps in the Rukun Negara and Wawasan 2020, and Dasar Ekonomi Baru. And particularly, for example, one can think about issues such as the regional differences. Why, for example, you have a high degree of alienation, which Tan Sri referred to earlier, in Sabah and Sarawak, and so on and so forth. So I think it is very useful for us to revisit this whole question of Wawasan 2020 in the connection of this kind of discussion, and not to accept the reduction of that broad vision for the nation in terms of simply achieving high income status. But I think it's also important for us to think about it very seriously, because in fact, we are very much involved in deluding ourselves at a national level. If you think about the data which we have, the data which is normally presented is so-called per capita income data, or per household income data. But who is excluded from that calculation? Of course, we are talking about mainly foreign labor, which will have a very, very important presence in this country, as we have been recently reminded by a whole range of employers. Now, what is the significance of that? When Richard Rayot was the Minister for Human Resources in, I think, 2014, he asked for a report which estimated that the number of foreign workers in the country at that time was 6.7 million. Of that 6.7 million, if you look at the official data from 2014, you will find that only 2.2 were recognized. In other words, those were the ones who were considered documented. Another 4.5 million were not documented. In other words, 2/3 of the foreign labor force in this country were undocumented and do not even figure. And if you look at a lot of the statements which have been made about census, about data, they do not include foreign workers generally. It's not clear whether it's only undocumented, but the impression we get is that all foreign workers are not included. So if you take the national income data, or the per capita or per household income data, and you have a reduced denominator because you are ignoring, let us say, 6 to 7 million foreign workers, then you get very, very skewed exaggeration of per household income and per capita income. This, I think, is a major delusion which we have been conducting in this country for quite a long time. And unfortunately, we continue to conduct, and this, I think, is something which needs to be addressed. Now, the next point, which I think Tan Sri correctly highlights, is that there has been a stalling not only of manufacturing growth, but also of services growth. He does not get into a discussion as to why, but I think that's very, very important. Now, we all know that manufacturing growth largely came to an end about a quarter of a century ago, in 1997, or at least by the turn of the century. But we were told subsequently, especially when Datuk Sri Najib was the Prime Minister, that we were graduating from manufacturing growth to services growth. We are moving from the tertiary sector growth to from secondary sector growth to tertiary sector growth. But if we look at what has been happening in terms of services growth in the period since then, that means in the last 2 decades, we will see that most of the services growth has actually been in what are statistically categorized as traditional services. Okay, the only modern services where there has been a significant increase in employment has actually been government services. Now, how is government services output measured? They are measured because we do not have good measurements of government productivity. They are measured by the emoluments which are paid to the worker, to the government servants. Now, when Tun Mahathir stepped down in 2003, there were 850,000 workers. When Datuk Sri Najib lost the election in 2018, 15 years later, he left behind 1.7 million. About 300,000 or so were not confirmed, so often you hear the figure 1.4 million. But the point I'm trying to make here is that the number of people in the public sector, people working in the public sector, actually doubled, okay, from 850,000 to 1.7 million. And then we also know that as we approach every election, there has been a significant increase in emoluments for those working in the public sector, not least during the period of the pandemic. The only people who actually increased their incomes, not necessarily by a huge amount, were actually people in public service. So this is something I think which is very important for us to consider when we are looking at a lot of our official data and trying to understand what this data means. I would just take this opportunity to make a slight footnote here, and that is that we have a very interesting situation where we find that during the period of the pandemic, it is likely that government expenditure was more egalitarian than ever before. I will come back to this issue in a moment, but I think this is very important for us to recognize. So I was a bit surprised, to be quite honest, that of the suggestion in the slides that inequalities actually increase as a consequence of the pandemic. I also am reminded that when the pandemic started, Dato' Uzair, the head of the statistics department, mentioned that he was going to conduct surveys every 1.5 months or 2 months or so during the pandemic. But we only got a hint of what was in the first report. We never got a hint of what else was there. And I hope Tan Sri Nazlan will enlighten the Malaysian public by telling us later, not in the course of today's session, but at some point in the future, inform us about what that data reminds us. Of course, it's mainly of historical interest now, but nonetheless, I think it is very mindful of how we deal with disasters and problems like that. The last point I would like to make in this connection of the whole question of the growth momentum slowing down, as Tan Sri correctly points out, is the fact that we have had some unprecedented problems. Let's face it, the growth slowdown of the last half a year has been due to not the war per se, but rather the sanctions imposed on Russia, on Belarus, but increasingly on China and others. Now, of course, we know that during the Trump period, Trump basically tried to corner China, and we also know that Abe Shinzo, the late Abe Shinzo, Prime Minister of Japan, joined him. So both the US and Japan tried to isolate China. Now, why is this important? All Southeast Asian countries, including, or some would say especially Malaysia, are highly involved with China. So when the Chinese economic growth is subverted in this way, it adversely affects those of the rest of us, not only in Southeast Asia, but also in much of the rest of the developing world. So the implications are quite serious. And I think it's also important for us to recognize that what we see very recently with the interest rate hikes is a deliberate attempt to slow down economic growth. I have no time to get into what is happening in the US and why this is happening, but I think it's very important for us to recognize raising interest rates, which is happening all over the world. Over 100 economies have actually raised interest rates in the recent period, is a major problem, because how do you have economic recovery when you're raising interest rates and making it much, much more difficult for people to cope, not only on the consumption side, but especially to finance investments. The third point I would like to make is, I'll be much briefer on this, and that is, I think we need to pay far, far more attention to what is happening on the fiscal front, both in terms of collection of revenue, especially the tax revenue, which has been declining, I would emphasize, since the middle of the 1980s. But has been declining, especially recently. And we should also look at the other side of it. I think Jacob Meerman was at UKM when he looked at this issue, and Jacob Meerman was, of course, is well known for his work on public expenditure in Malaysia, where he showed that that public expenditure in Malaysia, contrary to what most of us assume, is not progressive, but regressive. Now, take that together with the work which the late Ismail Saleh pioneered, where he shows that on the tax side, taxes have been regressive, right? From the 1960s at least, okay? And it has become more regressive in the period since the mid-1980s, because property taxes were dropped, and income taxes were also reduced, and instead consumption taxes were introduced and have become much more significant. The fourth point I would like to make the other point to be made is that there has been, Tan Sri mentioned the point of the ECRL, but there is a larger point to be made about the ECRL and why I have been making, some people say, making a mountain out of a molehill. The problem with a lot of GLC debt and a lot of infrastructure, which was previously considered to be development expenditure, has now been moved to GLCs such as Dana Infra. And what you find in these GLCs is that they borrow. They borrow ostensibly because they're going to get a revenue stream from the building of the infrastructure. But in fact, this is not going to materialize. If you think about, for example, all the borrowings for ECRL, ECRL will have a tough time covering operational expenses, let alone paying back for the development expenditure, which, by the way, has been grossly exaggerated. My friends from school, most of whom became engineers, will tell you that the original ECRL would have cost about 17 billion to build. The bill, when announced by Datuk Sri Najib at the end of 2017, was going to be 81 billion, okay? 81 as opposed to 17 billion. But because of the postponement of payments of interest and so on and so forth, the eventual bill, what Malaysians would have to repay, would be somewhere in the region of 110 billion. Okay, so we are talking about, in just one case, with the case of infrastructure, we are talking about a debt which younger Malaysians would have to pay into the future of a huge amount of money. So this is a very, very serious problem. And unfortunately, the government for over a decade now has been happily borrowing away. And the danger with GLC debt is that it does not go to Parliament. Public Accounts Committee does not look at it. It does not come under any scrutiny. The government happily borrows away and is ultimately responsible for repayment of this debt with no prospect of a revenue stream which would compensate for it. So it's a very, very serious problem. The fourth point I would like to make here is that we have a serious problem that Tan Sri correctly pointed out, that we are a very vulnerable nation. But one of the reasons we are very vulnerable is that household debt is growing. It's growing not by small amounts, but by huge amounts. And if you look at the incentives, say for the central bankers consider more debt to be evidence of greater financial inclusion. Okay, so if your KPI is to increase financial inclusion, you'll be very happy with more debt. But I think it is extremely dangerous. I mean, we all make jokes and remarks about alongs and so on, but it is very much part of life. If you think, for example, about the buy now, pay later schemes, where people people buying furniture, etc., pay double what they should be paying precisely because of this kind of phenomenon. So we are talking about serious household debt, well over 80% of average incomes. Okay, and you can be sure this is a phenomenon not affecting the poor, because the poor do not qualify very often for debt, and neither does it affect the rich. It is really affecting the middle class. And I think it's useful to look at the data and a 2019 study by my colleagues at Khazanah Research Institute, which basically shows that the B40 category is a misleading category. We are really talking about B70, and possibly after the pandemic, etc., possibly even B80. Okay, but anyway, that's another discussion. And related to that, of course, is that the young people in the middle class are almost indebted even before they start employment. Okay, PTPTN and so on and so forth. So we are talking about a highly indebted nation. The last point I think I will make, and I'm really run out of time, is the whole question of foreign labor. We have to stop deceiving ourselves. When we have an official labor force of about 16 million, and about 2 million are foreigners, that means about 14 million, and then you have another 7 million or so. That means 1/3 of our labor force is foreign, okay? And we don't even keep tabs of what they are doing, what they receive, and so on. And let's face it, they depress wages for the lower end of the Malaysian labor force. So I think it is very, very important for us to take the labor issue, foreign labor issue, very, very seriously. There are no simple, easy answers, as everybody knows, and we have to take the bull by its horns. There's much more which can be said, but I've already taken a bit of time. Let me stop here. And once again, thank you very much, Tan Sri Noor Azlan, for a very useful and insightful presentation. And I hope we have a debate not only today, but also at the national level on the presentation and its implications. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah. Thank you very much to Prof. Jomo. Now we're going to move to our second discussion yang membahagikan Emeritus Professor Datuk Dr. Abdul Rahman Embong. Let me read a bit of his CV. So Abdul Rahman Embong is Emeritus Professor in Sociology of Development from Institute of Malaysia and International Studies, IKMAS, University Kebangsaan Malaysia, where he served for many years as a Principal Research Fellow until retiring in January 2018. While at IKMAS, he was concurrently a founding principal fellow for 3 years at the Malaysia Institute of Integrity. He was president of Malaysia Social Science Association for 10 years between 2000 and 2010, and is the association's special advisor from 2010 till present. He is a founding life member and fellow of the Academy Professor Malaysia and sits on its first Executive Council since 2019 until 2021. So with that, I welcome Professor Dato' Dr. Abdul Rahman Embu.
Thank you, Prof. Dr. Shazida, moderator, and Assalamualaikum, selamat pagi to everyone. To Council Azlan, thank you for your very thought-provoking and insightful presentation. To Prof. Jomo, thank you for your comments. And to Academy Professor Malaysia, thank you for the invitation. And good morning to all our friends in this lecture, attending this lecture. Now, I think much has been said by Tan Sri Azlan, which I find very stimulating, and also the response by Prof. Jomo as the discussion just now. What I would like to do is just to add a few more points to that to provoke the discussion, and I agree fully that the discourse here, or the conversation here, should not end here, but it should be widened to the nation, because this affects the future of our country. It's beyond recovery. Beyond recovery, that definitely is a very important point to be made, and with respect to advancing the nation. Now, I was intrigued by Tan Sri's points, especially about when he talked about the structure of the economy and on the vulnerable nation, the 5 dimensions that he talked about. I think is something to be looked into more deeply in not only today, but more beyond today, and especially the vulnerable households, whether it's B40 or now B80, as Jomo indicated, and about SMEs, about the firms and the economy of the SMEs, about the regional disparities, which are the cause of not only of economic and social concern, but also the cause of political discontent, the historical discontent, grievances that have been debated, especially about Sabah and Sarawak. The fiscal constraint, the subsidies, which is mounting, and that's very true. And of course, the last point that Tansi mentioned about the 5 dimensions is the quality workforce and quality job. I just, on this issue, I just would like to share one point, which I think either as another dimension, or it would, a point that will make the vulnerabilities more vulnerable, which is about the impact of climate change. The impact of climate change on the Malaysian economy and on Malaysian society, on the households and the rest. And among the impacts of climate change in Malaysia, floods are perhaps the worst. And if to go by some statistics, which is a bit outdated, but nevertheless, floods in Malaysia cost about 0.13% of the GDP over the last 20 years, but this is rather in our outdated data, 2017. And if we update it to 2021, I think perhaps the percentage is bigger. And referring to the floods in 2021, the December floods in 2021, the cost to the economy and society was in the region of 6.5 billion, maybe an understatement, but still it is very big. And the important point about that is that only 20 to 30% of the losses due to the floods are covered by insurance, which means that the rest are not covered at all. And the point here that we have got to see from the regional perspective is that whilst before people used to think in terms of floods affecting the East Coast region, Kelantan, Terengganu, Pahang, Kedah, and so on, but now floods are coming, and huge floods are coming to the states that are the prime movers of the economy that Prof. Azlan talked about. Selangor, Taman Sri Muda was one of the worst that was affected in the country last December, and we do not know. The floods are coming again, the monsoons are coming again very soon, and yes, the various agencies are making preparation for it, but some politicians are calling for elections even during the flood season. So the point is that the impact of the floods are really very worrying to the people. A survey in 2016 by the Medical Center indicate that over 80%, over 81% of the people are very worried about the flood. And I think if we take a more recent survey, the percentage will be very high, will be much higher because of the experience in the last 1 year or so. So I think the impact of the floods, the climate change, the floods, will have to be factored in very seriously to the dimensions of vulnerabilities that Malaysians face, households face, and households are the worst hit. And this will make subsidies inflate further, because of course, every time that floods, disasters like this happen, the government has got to take action in order to alleviate the sufferings of the people. Now, the point is that while I was mentioning about the floods and so on, how do we address this? Of course, we have got the NADMA, the National Disaster Management Agency, and the performance of NADMA last year, especially in December, in the December floods was not very sterling. But I would like to quote a report, the UN 2020 status report on Malaysia's handling of disasters, of floods and so on. It refers to NADMA in particular. It says, among the most important challenges for Malaysia to tackle during the upcoming years are the inefficiencies within the rigid and hierarchical top-down disaster management system. I think this has got to be tackled very seriously. And Malaysia has got to put the climate change issue, especially the floods, as one of the top on the agenda, and to be built into the recovery plan. I'm sorry, post-recovery, beyond recovery, in order to move forward to advance the nation. And that's my first response to the economic dimensions. And I believe that we will have more debate on the points that he has raised, very insightful points that he has raised. Now, the second part of my comments are triggered or rather inspired by his remarks towards the end of his presentation, that we shouldn't behave like the ostrich with the head in the sand and saying that nothing happens, and not even seeing the elephant in the room. And Tan Sri has mentioned the elephant in the room, the unmasking of the economic structure due to the crisis and all that. And Prof. Jomo said, why only now the unmasking? It has been there. So, but anyway, the point is that the elephant has been in the room for a long time. But because of the ostrich effect, we didn't seem to address and take the bull by the horn. I think that is a very important point. Now, I want to highlight one point made by Prof. Jomo in his commentary, that why for the last 30 years since 1991 until 2020, the national narrative was Kawasan 2020, Vision 2020, to be a developed nation. But the first challenge was to build a united Bangsa Malaysia consisting of all ethnic groups in the country, which are at ease with itself and all that. And this national narrative is not being carried through beyond 2020 at the national official level as the official narrative, not even in Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama, National Prosperity Vision, which I think is not good. I mean, it's a waste of ideas, of brilliant ideas. I mean, using the terminology used by Tan Sri, it's a waste of brilliant ideas that have been discussed and formulated 30 over years ago by the top thinkers of the nation and by policymakers. If this is not carried through and integrated into the next Wawasan, the next vision, 2030, in the Wawasan Kemakmuran Bersama, it should be part of it. It should be made part of it. And of course, the device post and recovery programs, advancing the nation in accordance with the conditions of the present, as indicated by Tan Sri, and also indicated by Prof. Jomo. So I think that point has got to be emphasized. Now, the other point that triggered my thinking was that recovery without reforms is a waste. That is Francis' point. And I think this is something that is very crucial that we have got to embed in our policy thinking and policy formulation, because reforms are critical for post-recovery, for advancing the nation forward. And in this regard, I want to mention two reforms, two very necessary reforms that Malaysia needs to undertake to advance the nation. One is, of course, the reform of governance institutions of governance, especially with regard to corruption and the upholding of integrity. I think everybody knows corruption has become the bane of the nation. I mean, we have been a very successful nation, held up in high esteem by the developing world. The success stories of the 1990s and the early 2000s, and Malaysia as part of the Asian miracle and all that. But we always say that failure is the mother of success. But we should also look at the other way around. That success can also be the stepping stone to failure. And I think the success and the glories of the late 20th century, I mean, the successes, the rise of the rise of the expanding new middle class in Malaysia, with the sense of confidence, the corporate class and all that. Yes, we saw that. But how those things have got to be translated into further progress. And this, I think we have got to know. So the point that I want to make here is that corruption has become very serious. If 30 over years ago in the late 1990s, early 2000s, when we were talking about the National Integrity Plan at that time, people in the main were saying, yes, there was a change of values, etc., but they tend to say that corruption was a fact of life, not a way of life at that time. But today, corruption seems to have become a way of life. It's accepted. Malu apa bosku has become a slogan. Now, this is really something terrible. So from petty corruption, it has become mega corruption. From corruption as a way of getting things done in small departments, it has become systemic corruption. And in other words, corruption has become institutionalized as part of the system. So, and the broken system cannot control it. So we have got cases of all sorts of cases like MDB, SRC, and various other things that I will not go into. So and its impacts upon the culture, the values and attitudes of the people. The people seem seem to even respect those who have been charged with corruption. So if this goes on, Malaysia will face the danger of becoming a nation without a soul, without a conscience, if this is not seriously addressed. Now, the economic losses to the nation because of corruption, I mean, are huge. Now, according to the Global Financial Integrity Report 2017, losses are at least between 40 billion to 60 billion every year to Malaysia. The report also says that Malaysia has lost a whopping 1.8 trillion ringgit between 2005 and 2014, partly due to corruption practices that have resulted in illicit financial flows, etc. Now, this was before the exposure of the various scandals that we have heard in the last few years. Now, this report was in 2018. So the point I want to make here is that this is one of the most important reforms in the post-recovery period that any government that comes to power through the GE15 must address. There's no other way but to come down hard on corruption and to reform the broken system. Laws on corruption may have to be made more stringent, wrongdoers must be punished accordingly to send a message that corruption does not pay, and that we need to learn from the practice of some countries, the good practices of some countries on this issue, that we must strengthen institution of governance, uphold the rule of law, support support the independence of the judiciary, and strengthen the independence of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission by making it accountable directly to Parliament. And very importantly, there must be a change in the culture, values, and attitudes among the people towards corruption and bribery, and that change has got to be done very seriously and very fast by the whole of society and by the government, and that members of civil society must join in this struggle to combat corruption and strengthen integrity, and civil society coalitions such as the Rasuah Busters should be supported and expanded. Now that's my first point about reform, the corruption, which is a real elephant in the room. Now, the second point about reform is reform the politics of governing and the art of leadership and administration to make it more efficient, more effective, and less bureaucracy. Now, I just want to focus on the key issue here. I think we have experienced the parliamentary democracy for the last 65 years, and that we also have practiced coalition politics. No one particular party can rule the country by itself. It has got to have a coalition. And today, in the past, we have two big coalitions, Barisan Nasional and Pakatan Harapan. And today we have got three coalitions, including the Perikatan Nasional. Now, the point I want to make here is that every coalition government, whether PN or Pakatan, they have got to constitute a cabinet which consists of representatives of political parties in the coalition. Now, the point I'm making here is that the pool of talent from political parties does not reflect the whole nation. So we need more talent than just that, than from the pool of political parties that win the election and form the government. So why not we think outside the box? That the new post-recovery period, as the agenda of advancing the nation towards 2030 and beyond, why not we have a different kind of arrangement in the politics of governing? That means not just those from political parties, but bring in technocrats into the cabinet. Perhaps 1/3 of the whole cabinet composition should consist of technocrats who are above partisan politics and whose concern is the nation's welfare and progress. Well, it may not be, the idea may not be received or welcomed much by the political parties, but there must be a change in the mindset of political party leaders that going into politics is not for personal gain, but to serve the nation. And if we think that the approach of having professionals, technocrats to run the nation together with the political leadership, then we have got to bite the bullet. So I think this particular issue, I think I made this suggestion last year in one of the sessions under Academic Professor Malaysia, and I hope this point can be debated further. So on that note, I end my comments, and congratulations to Dr. Azlan for your very insightful and thought-provoking presentation, and also to Prof. Jomo for those interesting and insightful comments. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you for the interesting discussion on the notes given by Tan Sri. So perhaps I'll give back to Prof. Tan Sri to discuss further on the comments, notes, and given by both of our discussants. Please, Prof.
Thank you, Sharida. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Prof. Jomo and Dato' Rahman. I believe that the panelists are very much broadly in sync with my thinking, but adding few more variables into it so that we can have more to raise more concerns on our side. I would not debate on the facts and things like that, but But my concern, I mean, I want to share it here. Two parts. One is about the fact that we have a Vision 2020, but as what Prof. Jomo mentioned, I share the same feeling. When we came to 2020, no one talks about it. I mean, maybe people are hiding behind COVID. But I remember that I tried to push for the idea that people, hey, come on, let's talk. After 30 years, what happened to it? One of my concern is about moving such agenda for the country. Honestly, I think, yes, we have a Vision 2020, but I still believe that we have plenty of room to improve in terms of our institutional mechanism, how to conduct the reforms. You rightly mentioned, I'm very familiar with the 9 challenges, 9 thrusts that was mentioned by Tun M in his inaugural speech about Vision 2020. But unfortunately, everybody just merely looked into the income level. But all the other 9 parameters were taken for granted. No one looks into unity. No one looks into, caring society. No one looks into various other 9 challenges that was circling the income level. So I have that slide, and I always wonder that what does it mean? It means that while we have a vision, but we do not institutionalize it. There's a lot of songs that we created, a lot of slogans that we created. I think the generation of 1990 to 2020 will remember this. I mean, we are singing all these songs and so on. But actually, when I came in 2006, when I came into M10 at that time, even then I realized that people are not really properly looking into, are we progressing or not? So that is one of the things that why I'm here to look into. Probably there are new ways about how to move such agenda. Again, I mean, whether it's unmasked or not, I mean, terminology-wise, I'm not so worried about that. But the point that the slide that I put at the end, I think that characters of the ostrich hiding behind the heads behind the sand is getting more obvious. We don't like to discuss much about our problems, the real problems that we are facing. That's why the presentation that I prepared is really pushing for everyone to look beyond recovery. If you look at the numbers that we are putting up, yeah, things might be okay and so on, but the fact that all these structural problems and more as added by Prof. Jomo and also Datuk Rahman is actually, who is attending that? I believe that if we make no change, another 10 years, if we assemble again, I believe that I can use the same slide and adding what Prof. Jomo and Datuk Rahman are adding to it. Who is doing it? Which institution are doing it? Are we measuring our performance? Are we looking into actions that we are doing? That is my worry. My worry is that, we are trapped in this kind of mind that good at identifying problems, but not able to execute things. I sit in the NDPC, National Development Planning Council. I believe that almost all the documents, the master plan, the blueprint, what's not, the roadmaps are great. If you look at it, we launch one after another. But after 3 years, we forgot about it. Last month, I was in a little bit debate with the Ministry of Education. When I raised the concern, what happened to the blueprint on education that was launched in 2013? We thought that when we launched that in 2013, the 11th so-called wave of change is so great. But unfortunately, we wasted the time. And the only thing that I got to know is that, we are coming up with another blueprint. So we are becoming blueprint hunger in this country. Everybody is busy in planning blueprints, coming up with jargons, terminologies, and so on, but no one is attending it. So that is my most immediate concern about our nation. And I agree that, in terms of several other parameters I mean, more on the dimensions like, for example, like when Datuk Rahman mentioned about the climate change. In many parts of the world, the discussion on climate change is just like a time bomb. No, every day people were discussing that in almost every corner, ADB, World Bank, IMF, just name it. Every day were talking about that. But I don't think people are really take that seriously in Malaysia. The WWF and Bursa Malaysia make presentation to the EAC. I don't mind to share this. I think many of us also known about all this. About 70% of our exports are going to the country that are very serious about adhering to all these sustainability measures. If we don't make the change, we're going to lose all this market. You know, there's nothing that grants us, there's nothing that assures us that we will be there. I mean, forever people will be buying from us if we do not attend our, environmental and so on. And no doubt, I mean, we are talking now, I mean, Pakistan is drowned, Malaysia, I mean, regions that never had flood now having flood, tanah runtuh dan sebagainya. But still, in Malaysia, no one really cares about it, honestly. So I hope that we get more input here. But if I want to make a call to all the colleagues here, we need to pull ourselves together to voice for the change. Academics especially, I think, I'm worried because when I look at the academia, sorry to say this, because these are the assemblies of professors, not that many professors are really seriously into it. I mean, yes, we write papers, we celebrate quality papers and so on, but no impact at all. We become distant to Putrajaya. I know I sit in Putrajaya. I know that Putrajaya and the academia are not connected. Our voice are very important. I look forward to hear that. And of course, we can move this and we need to push harder and get more discourse of this nature. So thank you. Let me end there because I think there are a lot of more people who probably want to say something there. Thank you, Shazida.
All right, thank you very much, Prof. I think a lot have been said. Perhaps we like to open for any questions. Let me see in our chat box if there's any questions from the audience, or perhaps Dr. Zaharul, is there any questions from the WhatsApp, perhaps?
I saw Tan Sri Kamal is there. Maybe Tan Sri Kamal want to share something. I long tak dengar dari Tan Sri Kamal.
Yes, Tan Sri?
Those are my guru.
Anyone? Prof, it seems that we're still waiting for some of them to ask. Perhaps I will start something. I just want to ask about the issue about how we not aware, or as you mentioned just now, the issue of climate, the issue of food security, the issue of other than what we look into the vulnerable nations 1 to 5 just now you have mentioned. You say that it's there, but people are not really aware, or people know but not doing anything. Do you know why? Why is it happening? Is it because we are so complacent with everything, because we know anything happen, there will be a backup, a buffer towards it, or is it because we are becoming very ignorant about what is going on? Why is it?
I think seriously, one is that we are overly dependent on government, overly dependent on the government. There must be some kind of movement that probably to take roles and play a greater responsibility. But similarly, if you look in the government, I mean, I'm referring to Putrajaya, I mean, again, almost all of them are aware of these problems. If you look at the 5-year plan, the 12th Malaysia plan, the 11th Malaysia plan, even the 10th Malaysia plan, I bet you 80% of them are almost the same. They might come up with some new jargons to say that things are different, but actually it is the same. If any one of you grab the 12th Malaysia plan, in the 12th Malaysia plan, every chapters will highlight what has been achieved and what has not been achieved in 11th Malaysia plan. I think around 80% is not being achieved and is declared openly, but no one cares. No one cares. I think that's my kind of the paradox here. I mean, who actually will make the move? in order to address all this. Issue unemployed graduates. I remember Datuk Pa started discussing this in 2005. And until today, it's even worse and worse. Prof. Jomo, you rightly put this case of bringing in foreign workforce in the 9th Malaysia Plan. 9th Malaysia Plan, when I was first seconded to M10 then, 2006 to 2009. I can't remember the exact line, but I can point to the exact line in the page saying that the country would like to reduce our dependence. But we go the other way around and no one cares. Maybe there are a few people cares, but it does not reach to the level that it pushed the government to make the change. And now we are, imagine that, yes, the numbers might look 2 million, but I think you are right, Prof. Jomo, there are maybe about 6 million of them. So 6 million is almost near to half of the workforce, a foreign workforce, unskilled. And you are talking the country to move to become an advanced nation with 6 million unskilled foreign workforce? No, we are not going to. We are complacent. The nation are complacent on the part of the government as well as the society. The society only want what? The society only want things to be cheap. Kalau boleh murah, kalau boleh percuma bagi saya. Saya duduk di rumah tak payah buat apa-apa dah. You just send everything to me. I mean, so if we have that mentality, we are not able to forever, cheap becoming a good offering. And trust me, when cheap dominate everything, the country will downgrade. Cheap talents, cheap workforce, cheap products, and everything is cheap. So this is a very serious issue. The trust of development is seriously missing here. Maybe I would like to hear views from others. I must say, Prof. Jomo and Dr. Rahman and the rest, I'm very concerned about this, honestly. More so after the 2 years when I sit in EAC Secretariat. Maybe some of the panel want to respond.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
Chairperson,
Yes.
may I just say a few things?
Yes, please. Yes.
I'm impressed. Betul.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wah, nampak minta maaf saya teragak tadi, nampak badan dah besar sikit.
Badan tak besar, the forest at the back is
oh, okay, sorry, minta maaf, tak perasan.
Not at all.
Nampak apa tadi ni?
Don't worry. I'm from Sherwood Forest actually. Anyway.
What? Because your name does not appear, Tan Sri.
Yeah.
Ya ke? Alamak.
Tu saya tak agak cakap saya dengar suara baru tahu.
Anyway,
okay, go ahead.
I'm impressed with your presentation this morning, Tan Sri. And as usual, you have given us a kind of hope to do something which is positive for our nation. I'm also equally impressed with what Prof. Jomo has been saying, and our dear friend, Prof. Rahman. I think you're right in the sense that we have gone through 12 Malaysia plan, but before that we have one plan as well. The only problem is we keep on saying that this plan will be good for the next 5 years. But you rightly said that the institutional framework cannot carry through what is the objectives, sasaran, all the 5-year plans, which is a bit annoying, Tan Sri, because you were inside there, you should know better. Is it the political will, or is it that the civil service or the people who are supposed to do the job as well didn't push through that much? So we can't push this to the rakyat, we are not doing anything. I think there's a lot of pressure to do something good, but somehow we are good at planning, but when it comes to implementation, maybe we are very weak indeed. There's no seriousness, there's no urgency as we implied. I would like also to comment what Prof. Jomo was saying about foreign labor. Actually, technically, if we look at the minimum wage that is currently at 1,005, and before that, for the past 11 years, we already have 5 slots of minimum wages that keep on increasing and the last one in May was 1,005. One of the most important rationale to have the minimum wage is actually, one is to reduce the number of foreign workers. That's one of the reasons why I think we keep on pushing the minimum wage, so that the local workers in our country will get the benefit of a better income level. But somehow, the Ministry of Human Resources have so much power as limited resources, but the one who handles the incoming of foreign workers is actually Kementerian Dalam Negeri. So there's a kind of conflict of interest in this sense, because there's already, we know, vested interest and so on, that bring in foreign workers, sometimes illegally, as we pointed out. So that's one big problem. The other one was actually to push the industry, the owners of industry, to have a higher level of technology. Because as you push the wages, you have to act wisely, in the sense that you put in technology related mechanism in your own enterprises. So this will actually reduce, at the same time, the number of foreign workers coming in. But this does not happen, because all the owners of industry are keen to have a low wage level. So that's a big problem as well. It's easier to have foreign workers when you pay less. And these so-called high income nation, it's not there, because it doesn't happen. As you expressed, Tan Sri, about the B40, now Prof. Jomo said soon will be everybody will be B70 or 80 below than the top one. So those are points which I think relate to implementation. And I'm wondering why. Because if you look at all the even Vision 2020, wawasan kemakmuran bersama, they all have the almost same objective of making sure that nation works together as one family, but somehow along the line we are not ready. The mechanism is not ready, as you imply, Tan Sri. So I better stop there and see what is your reaction, as well as our friends attending this morning forum. Thank you so much, Madam Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Perhaps any comment from maybe Prof. Jomo? Prof, you want to say anything on that matters just now?
I don't think there's anything I need to add on this issue. I would emphasize that that Vision Wawasan 2020 was basically collateral damage for 1998. As we all know, Asian financial crisis led to a fallout within the national leadership, within the UMNO leadership, and that was the end of Wawasan 2020. So I'm not blaming the newer generation of national leaders for the abandonment of Wawasan 2020. But I think we still crave for a holistic view of what is needed to move the country forward. And in this regard, I think the work of the new president of PSSM, Professor Siti Daud, in terms of highlighting Tun Razak's view, is very, very important. Let me just give you a simple illustration. When Tun Razak was talking about the NEP targets and the outline perspective plan for 1971 to 1990, his emphasis was on the question of national ownership. Because one has to remember that in the first dozen years or so after independence, because of the kind of deal which the alliance leaders made with the British, we had basically a neo-colonial constitution. And basically, the economy remained essentially neo-colonial. And Tun Razak basically envisaged national ownership of the economy. And that was a crucial part. So basically 70% of the economy was to be owned by Malaysians. In the original conception, it was 30% Bumiputra, 40% non-Bumiputra. Today, the foreign ownership has gone up again. It went down to about 25% at one point, but now it has gone up to 40+%, almost half.
Yeah.
Okay, and nobody seems bothered at all about it. You know that the foreign ownership of the economy is almost half. Now, of course, there are a lot of perverse phenomena, but I think the problem is that in this country, almost every possible policy discussion is influenced by, as Prof. Rahman emphasized, what is in it for me? You know, what is in it for me? If I bring in these foreign workers, how much do I get? You know, that becomes the criteria for policy evaluation. It has nothing to do with any kind of serious thing. But frankly, let's face it, I don't think we are going to have a cabinet of technocrats unless you have a constitutional change. And it can be done. The 1991 or 92 constitution in Thailand, for example, envisaged that everybody who went into the cabinet has to resign as a member of parliament. You cannot remain a member of parliament. You're either part of the executive or you're part of the legislature. You can't be part of both. And this was the view. But we, you know, have happily inherited and embraced the British legacy, and we have a serious problem. I think we have, you know, after Tan Sri Anwar, you know, in the old days, he used to talk a lot about the whole question of acquiring technology. More recently, Tan Sri Kamal Saleh has been talking about questions of industrial and technology policy and so on. But they've all fallen on deaf ears, because besides the whole question of what is in it for me, policy making has been compromised. The other thing is, what do we tell the people? And what we tell the people has been influenced by a culture of what some of us have termed ethno-populism, where it is, you know, that's the national discourse of the day. We don't even have a nationalist discourse to speak of. Nationalism is identified with ethno-populism. So it's very, very unfortunate we have this kind of perversion of discourse, and this prevents us from moving forward. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I see your hands by Prof. Saleh.
Thank you very much. I can just say a few related to 2020. In a way, you know, a study, STI contribution to the national development years, Outlook 2020 by Academic Science. And during this period, of Vision 2020 or unachievement 2020 or limited Vision 2020. Yeah? So actually, in a way, it is not a very study because we didn't focus on Vision 2020, but we did include our analysis, our performance based on Vision 2020. It is there for anyone to read assessment. But I think it is I kind of agree with.
Your line is breaking up a bit. It's not really clear.
Okay, sorry, clear now?
It's like it's not really smooth, you know. Sometimes we can hear you, sometimes we lost you.
Okay, well, maybe enough for me to say. Maybe connection is not very enough to say that the for our Vision 2020 there, Outlook 2020 by Academic Science 2021, and a lot of time limitations of Vision
is basically a plan after to achieve 2020. It was just without a plan. So that's the of Vision 2020 implementation. And also the time vision was, but implementation, it's a lot of political, it is more for consideration and of building consideration. I think if we continue to do this way, going to repeat Tan Sri Azlan keeps will present the same in the next 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we run out of time now. I need to, we all of us, I think we have to wrap up this the talk today. So I like to ask again from Professor Tan Sri to give a few words before we end the session.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you everyone for adding views and concerns. Again, I think almost all of us broadly agree that we have a challenge that we need to attend. We have a serious problems that we must be together in attending this. I know that in many cases, I'm kind of very lucky to have the opportunity of living in Putrajaya and also living in the university. What I'm seeing is that while, of course, I know that in many discussions, whenever I try to put in, even in some of my social media, people will immediately in 2 seconds will drive the discussion toward politics. But I seriously believe that let us accept the fact that political uncertainty and all this chaos will be there for another 15 years. So what options do you have? What option do we have? There are countries that change their prime ministers many times, but somehow the country progress. Probably we need to accept the fact that political uncertainty will remain, but what are the options that we have in order to get things moving? I tend to look more into the civil workforce. There's a lot of things that can be done by the civil workforce. I mean, these are bureaucrats who are actually in charge of executing all the DASA and so on. We have enough DASA, we have enough plan, all of them are great, all of them are well written, all of them have nailed down to the issues very important for us, but we need to find ways of how to get these machineries to move. So maybe for us as academics, we need to loud ourselves, voice ourselves, be honest in our assessment, and advocate for change and give alternative for change. And we need to, kind of mobilize as many more to take this seriously. Sometimes, in many cases, sorry to say that I'm a Mantan Vice Chancellor as well, many happy to report all the good things, all the performance seems we are the best in the world already right now, but we are not making an impact. We have to make an impact. The nation needs us. If the politicians cannot do it, if the civil workforce cannot do it, probably the academia can come forward and take this more seriously in our work. So I would like also to thank everyone here. Thanks to Academy for inviting me. I don't have a final answer. I don't have a final solution, but at least I'm glad that I'm able to voice it here, and hopefully it will attract more people to come on board to join the wagon of getting the country to move forward. Let's not be ostrich, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof. Jomo, 1 minute statement from you. You are mute, Prof.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Tan Sri Azlan, and I want to emphasize your last appeal. Let us not be ostriches, and this is extremely important. I also want to thank Academy for opening up this debate. But these debates really need to dirayatkan. We really need to involve the population as a whole, and this I think is extremely important if we are going to make any progress. As Tan Sri Azlan emphasized, this crisis is too important to waste. If we do not learn, if we do not come out better, phoenix-like from this, I think it will be a real shame. And for this reason why I think it is very important for us to re-examine the premises of many of our discussions. The fact that we have had a very strong colonial heritage. You know, the recent death of the Queen of England in Africa and elsewhere, there are huge discussions about the colonial heritage and getting rid of the vestiges of neocolonialism. But here we don't have that. We have interest groups telling us, for example, oh, we must peg our ringgit to the dollar without thinking about the adverse consequences thereof. And we are also still taking our cue, unfortunately, largely from the mid-Atlantic, basically between the east coast of the US and London. We have so many policy discussions which are circumscribed by that. For example, the discussion now on healthcare financing, which the health minister has opened up, thankfully, you know, it threatens to go nowhere if we do not have a much richer discussion, where, you know, a discussion which is not simply influenced by American examples or German examples or British examples, but by the Malaysian experience and the problems of the Malaysian healthcare financing experience. This is where we need to go, and this is where the Academy has an important and, if not crucial, role to play. Thank you very much for this opportunity to join you, and thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Jomo. Professor Datuk Dr. Abdul Rahman, perhaps few words from you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I will quickly just underline 2 points. First is the question of ownership to the plans and policies and to the visions. And politicians come and go, and they have got very short-term kind of perspective. And so who should own it? And I think it's indicated briefly by Councillor Azlan that the civil service. Now, the Malaysian civil service has increased quantitatively, but it has got also to increase qualitatively. Malaysian civil service was regarded as one of the best in the developing world in the 60s and 70s. If you read works by Professor Arul Tillman on bureaucratic transition in Malaysia, that was the assessment then. And I think so the importance of the civil service is definitely without doubt that they have got to own the policies and the vision, because they are there, they are part of it. Now, the other dimension of owning the vision of the policies and plans is the civil society, the academia, and as part of the civil society. And I think academia and civil society have got to work together to enthuse the nation, to conscientize the nation about what needs to be done. Merakyatkan, as Prof. Jomo said just now, and I think I agree. And APM has made this move together with the others. And in terms of the civil society itself, the Raswa Busters has made the move. And one of the things that we have discussed before is one of the complaints is that the cabinet is so top heavy, it's very big size, and also there is a question of inefficiency. So, and that's why the idea of technocratic cabinet came up in order to and for that, there has got to be a kind of mindset change. And if this idea is taken up and owned by society, by civil society, by academia, it can be popularized, and perhaps it can contribute towards a change of the constitution and whatever. That means there needs to be a political will at all levels in order to effect a change for the betterment of the country beyond recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all, especially our distinguished guest speaker, Professor Tan Sri Datuk Sri Nur Azlan Ghazali, all the way from the States. Thank you very much to our two great discussants, Prof. Jomo and also Professor Abdul Rahman. I like to thank everybody. I think we have seen a lot and hear a lot. I think one of the quote I think I like to say again, this debate need to be dirakyatkan. I think that is very important. It shows how the roles that we should play, no matter who you are, we should be together in this crisis. And this crisis, as Tan Sri mentioned, is important not to be waste and to re-examine everything from every each angle in the economy, from planning until the action and monitoring, and also not to let go of the issues of climate change, food securities, and other things that's been happening in this world currently. So everyone, thank you very much again. Do look forward for our series of lecture series by APM. Thank you very much, and we hope we're going to have another intense discussion like today. So hope everyone will take care, and thank you very much.